Okay, we're officially on, guys. Alhamdulillah, salam, peace to everyone here live with us and watching the replay. Today is May 22nd, and we are discussing the journey of the soul, um, which is, as we all shared, um, a dense book, and I don't think any of us really finished the entirety of the book, even though it's like 70 pages or so. But the plan is to uh, go deep and learn more about ourselves and who we are as a reflection of what we're reading and what we are um, how we perceive the book and what actually comes out to us and what stands out to us in the book. Um, Even I've only read like up to page 50 something, or yeah,
Yeah, I'm around there
um,
too.
even though that's short, but I like highlighted a lot of areas because it did bring up a lot of stuff for me. But I think um, it would be good to kind of start with who the author is and the time period of the book. Um, the reason for that is because throughout reading the book, I'm like, yo, I had to keep reminding myself of the time period of when this was happening, right? And the author himself. Um, so the author is Ibn Tufayl, um, and he has a really long name, which I won't even go into that. But he was a philosopher. He was a novelist. He was an Islamic theologian and physician. Um, he lived around 1105 to 1185 CE in Andalusia, which is southern Spain. Um, and then it was part of Moorish region of Spain. So, kind of paint that image of southern Spain and the setting of where he lived, and the time period that he lived in. He served as a philosopher, poet, and physician in the courts in Granada, Sevilla, Fez, and Marrakesh. So Granada, Sevilla in southern Spain, that's Andalusia, and Fez and Marrakesh in today Morocco. So, which actually region-wise, like they're very, very close to each other. Um, and they were pretty much ruled under the Moorish region, but geographically they're different, right? As far as um, just the region, like I've been to Granada, I've been to Sevilla, and they're different. It's a different space. Um, he lived during the golden age of Islamic civilization and philosophy in Spain and North Africa, and who's heavily immersed himself in like intellectual and in the arts, in architect and literature. He was influenced by Ibn Sina, Avicenna, which is a philosopher, and Al-Ghazali. And really, the book that we read, the novel of Hayy ibn Yaqzan, is his most famous work, and is considered one of the earliest examples of philosophical novel work, which is interesting, right? Like to read one of the earliest examples of a philosophical novel in this context. So that's who the author is, which is pretty that's pretty badass, right? And during that time, like a lot of those philosophers were polymaths. Like they were philosophers, mathematicians, astronomers, um, they were into it all, right? Um, the reason why I really started to get into who this person is because the first half of the book, it seemed like I was reading a philosophy book, right? Like I was like, and it was intense in some kind of way. Like it went through a lot of reason and um, ways of studying quote unquote facts, which I felt disconnected from, right? So I guess maybe we'll start with um, with this question. How did you feel or what came up to you in the first part of the book, discussing when he's talking about um, Hayy, which, by the way, Hayy ibn Yaqzan, the meaning of that name is the Hayy means alive, the living. Bin Yaqzan, the son of the awakened. So even the name is symbolic, right? Like, novelists and writers, they don't choose anything lightly. Every letter it has meaning. Um, what did you guys overall? What do you guys think of that part of the reason, deducing? How did that land for you? Yes.
So just jump in. Um, I think because in the introduction it gave such a really good overview, I kind of got where he was coming from, sort of creating this world where does a person still find transcendence? Does a person still find God or universal being in the absence of culture and community and society? And I felt like because he gave such a good intro, it immediately put me in that space of like, okay, well, I'm gonna have to be in the space of what would it look like for a human who's raised by a deer to reason their way back to the ultimate expression of what they are, the essence of creation. Um, so um, I guess I enjoyed that part. For me, from the way he jumped from in the actual book, not in the intro, but in the body of the narrative, the way he jumped from reason to God was a bit quick for me, I guess, because of what led up to there. But I guess the feeling might have been to have it occur as an epiphany, like, oh, if this is the case, then this must be the case. And so I got it in those terms. But from there, it seemed like there were quantum leaps in reason, as opposed to maybe a transcendent experience that awakened him up to uh, the reality of of uh, of being. But I guess they said in the beginning that there will be two roads to it, right? This intellectual road, and
Yeah.
then this other, to wake up in the experience. And that leads to one of my, in the very beginning, what was it? I think it was on the third page. Okay, where it says, oh, the first page actually, where it says, when the philosopher and the Sufi met, Ibn Sina said, "What I know, he sees." And Abu said, remark, "What I see, he knows." And they go into this whole thing about the relationship between the mystic and the philosopher, or the one that is self-taught about God and the one who's well read through religion. It's a very interesting relationship to me.
Yeah, that stood out too. That line, that quote, that was fire. When I saw that, I was like, "Ooh, damn, that was real fire," right? Like, what is it? Yeah, what I know, he sees. What he sees, I know. Um, yeah, that's absolutely fire.
Oh, I found the other quote too. It says, there are two groups of seekers, those who deduce the truth by intellectual means and those who experience it. It's very interesting to
So
relate it that
yeah,
way.
that part, right? Deduce and experience. And I feel like that part about deducing is to me what felt like a hurdle to read through. I'm interested to hear the rest of the group on what that felt like. What was that feeling like in reading about reason? And I guess more importantly, was there a part of your journey that felt like you had to swift through reason?
I like that last question, Osama. I guess for me, I didn't get too far in the book, so I didn't really get beyond the reason deductive thing. I was excited to see where it was going, but I didn't make it. Um, so for me, the experience was really, at first, I was like, wow, this is a very interesting way to take us into the mind and of somebody who is just sort of organically witnessing and experiencing and asking questions and sort of intuitively experimenting to uncover to get his own questions answered because there's no one to ask or no one to teach. And I thought initially that was really fascinating, and then um, it really got to be a bit much because they're going into like the anatomy and everything. And I was like, I know all this. Why are they doing this? I understood the intention. I think for something that's written, especially for that time, maybe this is quite advanced knowledge to be relaying or demonstrating that somebody can, in the middle of a forest on an island by themselves, figure out on their own. Um, and I imagine the direction that they're going, or they were going, like you were saying, this instinct, um, the sort of like theotropic instinct that a person has to, in the same way that they're like, oh, how does the body work? What is death? Oh, it seems like this is a thing, sort of connecting the dots and seeing patterns in the natural world. This connection to the divine, or this desire to also get that question answered, is on the same level or of the same sort of instinctual curiosity of a human being by nature. So I think um, as far as I got, maybe that was part of the message. Um, in terms of how I experienced the whole reasoning aspect, I come from like a science medical background, and I think my spiritual journey really started when I was going deep into the sciences and questioning religion and questioning the things that I was raised with in terms of like very traditional Islamic upbringing. So it it was kind of like there was a kindred spirit there, that I was reading about. Um, that was thinking these things and asking these questions. And personally, like, I loved dissections as a younger person, so definitely connected with the character. Um, and yeah, this like spirit of discovery and um, like this tactile sensory experiential learning, I think I really loved. And I imagine that quote that you said, Antoine, what was it? The deductive and the experiential, right? And I think mysticism, it's the same experiential learning, which makes it so powerful. So you have your own. It's sort of both and, right? Like you're kind of doing the same tactile, experimental journey of your own, as if you're on an island by yourself, and it's just you and the divine, and wherever it goes, it goes. And in some ways, maybe it's similar. Again, I didn't get to the rest of the book, but yeah, I think that's somehow they're kind of the same thing in my mind in this moment. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody else, but yeah, the organic nature of experimentation and everything.
Yeah, totally. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. You painted such a beautiful picture about oh my God, that moon right now outside. I don't know where you guys live, but gorgeous. Um, wow, sorry, that is the moon is just I mean, okay, okay. Um, yeah, the you painted a picture of them both ways kind of converging into one way ultimately. And I think even for myself, like reading it, ha this is what I felt. So, like yourself, Madeline, I studied math and physics. So very super intellectual, if you will, right? Like, or not, like very mind heavy, right? Like, show me the proof, like, write it out. Um, so when I was reading it, and that mind came, came back, like it just came manifest. I'm reading certain stuff, and I'm like, yo, some of the stuff that's here is outdated, right? It's like completely outdated. Like, what is this? And as part of that reading, one thing came to mind of how dangerous it can be to use facts to talk about the truth. So, and I reflected that back on myself, when I started to go deeper in, learning more and more about myself, going deeper into knowing myself. In the beginning, really, I was trying to study and understand the facts. Okay, I was brought up in an Islamic tradition. My ancestors come from the Caucasus. I was born in Jordan. This happened, that happened, all of these things. And I'm trying to understand myself in a factual way. And then I don't know at what point, there was a point in time where there was a surrender and letting go of studying those facts. And to say, I am no longer interested in factual stuff, in understanding myself from a factual place, but rather I want to know the truth of who I am. So I think when I'm reading the book and going over that part about, reason, dissecting, I'm looking at the moon. Oh, there must be, you know, somebody that created the moon is turning around this and da 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 da. But I can be wrong as thinking that the earth is the center of all. Um, so that was really the part of the reason, and how it showed up for myself, and mirroring back to my own journey, and ultimately desire to really connect with the truth of who I am, rather than the understanding and satisfying the mind from that understanding, um, of the facts that I know about myself, or uh, the reasons about myself and the causality you know, that brought me to this point, this moment in time. So even though it was uncomfortable to read through that part, it was nonetheless juicy in its um, you know, in the terms of what it really gave me as far as self-reflection. So yeah, yeah, it is interesting. Wait, are you writing quotes?
Yes, it was just so good. I had to like put it up there so I could see it again.
That's dope. Yeah. Shah, did you get to that reason part?
You know, I didn't get to read it. I read the intro and that was it.
Awesome. What do you feel, what are you hearing what we already shared, what really comes up to you in that regards?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this meeting of two, of the heart and the mind, and I was thinking of that those two being inside of myself,
Hmm.
because I think I find myself swinging between my mind being uh stronger in wanting to understand the divine, and then versus my heart feeling it and letting myself kind of surrender to that. So when I
Hmm.
read that bit, I really like that quote. So I'm glad that others found that.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the um what was it that I highlighted that he because the interesting thing is that at some point, well, okay, well here's another part that I guess that's the part that Antoine, you said there was this leap, um, you know, and that was the main thing that was like, wait a second, what just happened here? There's this level of like, how did it jump to? And that's when I was like, okay, I got to remember how this when this book was written and by whom. And it's when he referred to God as him.
I knew it. That's where I was like, oh, like, okay. Not that it shouldn't be. Let me stop cutting you off. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was like, wait a second. How did it jump from this deducing to completely giving gender, you know, to to God? And I was like, wait. So I had to like remind myself, like, okay, this was written at this particular time. This is the audience. It's not like this book was gonna be at like Barnes and Nobles or anything like that. You know what I mean? Um, so that jump that went from, the heavenly bodies and to him, I was like, jumping to that gender was a bit kind of like a leap. Um, what did you feel about that, Antoine? I know you jumped in. You felt really excited about that part.
Because I'm tripping because yeah, that's the exact space where I was just like, wait a minute, like they didn't even like they didn't build a bridge to it or transition into like some epiphany happened, some breakthrough, some transition. Although they took us through it sort of sequentially, but right, like you like this person without um having not been raised with language and just now learning language jumps from talking about this inner being, this self experience, straight to this he and he and he and he and he. And I guess because of the time we live in, we're maybe extra sensitive to, like, you know, maybe God or universe or nature, you know, just imposing a gender onto it maybe. But for me, it just, yeah, it hit me like, whoa, like we were just like in a whole different space. And so when we jumped over here, and I can still see why it's still profound even now, and especially for the time that this existed in. But the way it did it, it started on page 29 when, because he was there in this space of, like, I highlighted one thing. He spoke about how could non-existence have any link or relationship with absolute being, whose essence is the source of existence of every being. Then he goes on and on about the goodness and power that he experienced from that realization, and then boom, right in the next paragraph on page 30. Oh, where my page 30 go? Oh, okay. Oh yeah, and then it gave us one thing: a created universe, he realized, requires the concept of a creator who is not an object. All that's well and good, all that's well and good. And then boom, in that next paragraph, it goes to, such a creator must be above the attribute of extension and length, width and depth, and also above all the attributes of physical bodies. Such a creator would have the power over his creation and would know it totally. Should he not know he created it? And he is, it's just so many, it's just hitting with so many he's. It's just, you can't not be like, the whole gender norm conversation, and like the he that's enveloped the world as far as hierarchy and all these things. Not that I'm against the he as a term or gender identity, or you have to take that away from God or something, but it's just so blatant, and it speaks to the time that they translated this, because I have no idea what the true Arabic, Arabic, right? This is
Yeah.
written
So
in
that,
Arabic.
yeah, I was also interested in seeing what term it was written, like what Arabic term um it was used for that.
Yeah.
Uh, because if, for example, the term who was used, which is in essence for most of the people, like this, the mystics, that's
Mm-hmm.
gender neutral. Um, so I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But
Yeah,
it was interesting, just to see that jump, because then it felt like it got religious for a moment from
yeah,
that standpoint, like almost like it jumped from the analyzing of the universe, and the universe taking to, okay, there's this otherliness, this divinity or something that is animating everything, to, instead of diving more deep into that, it felt like it got religious. But then I still could read the I still could feel the essence of what it was trying to point at. And that might have to do more with the translation than what was actually expressed through in the original text.
right. Yeah,
I mean, I think it's okay to acknowledge that, like, the writer probably has his own biases given he's coming from and his
Facts.
upbringing and his culture and his religion. So, like, that's just a fact, and facts are be
Facts are
facting.
okay, right? Like, it's okay.
Yeah. I feel like we're trying to make excuses for him, but it's just, yeah, he's a product of his time, and
Yeah.
there- there's patriarchy and there's religion and there's these like archaic, outdated stuff for us in 2024, and that's gonna happen with any text from that time, I think.
Facts. Yeah.
facts.
Facts or facts.
Yeah, yeah. So that yeah, there was definitely that jump that kind of like, okay, that's interesting thing about reading some of these books. It's not the first book that we encounter with um, these kind of quote unquote biases, I guess. Um, the thing is, it's really being able to discern and consciously choose to let that one go or accept it if we want to accept it consciously, um, rather than having it be subconsciously influence our uh, whether it's our ideas or sometimes they seep into our beliefs, right? So I think that's why that that stood out. Yeah, and I think at some point it really, beyond that point, once it got into um where was it? There was some point that I felt it was really um
While you're looking for that, oh, you're about to talk.
no, go ahead.
There was this other point that I saw that kind of speak to the idea that I can't remember exactly what page it was on, but he said that at some point to speak to what this being is skirting the edge of the unsayable.
That's what I
And
was looking.
that's what you was looking for? Yo, you be in my head or I be in yours. And that like at that point it could only be expressed in metaphor.
Mhm.
And I was like, it made me think of the poets, you know.
Yeah, yeah, analogies, and it's the part right before then where he was like, okay, beyond this point, people of reason are and intellect are quote unquote not welcomed. Like he got to the point, he's like, okay, here's reason. You want reason, you want to do, deduce to that. He felt like he gave that to the audience, to the reader. And then there was a point where like, um, I don't know what page exactly, but he just like said it clearly that beyond from this point on, we're going to talk about things that reason has no place. That if you going to ask, how can it be one and many? This is not the place. So I think that's kind of what Shah was alluding to earlier, as far as like this relationship within ourselves between the mind and the heart. Like the mind is constantly looking for how, but how, but how. Oh yeah, things can be multiple and one at the same time, but how, but how. Um, and in that moment, I feel like what he did was invite us into this sacred heart space to say, okay, we've entertained the mind, and that's all good. But now let's make that pilgrimage to the heart. Let's leave the mind behind and go to the heart and really establish ourselves and our experiences from that space. Um, which is a challenge, like, constantly having the mind just, you know, asking how, but how? Give me a proof. What's your proof? Um,
I have a question. Oh,
mm,
so now were you about to say something? You go. I've been
No,
talking a lot.
no. I just said, that part about not listening to the mind. Yeah, because the mind can get in the way. I know this from my own experience. And people won't believe because it's something, these multi-dimensional things that happen as a mystic when you're on the mystic path. It, you cannot fathom them with your mind. It's there's too many multi-dimensional things going on for you to understand it. That's why in traditional Islam you follow guides, because they have that sort of third eye vision. The third eye vision is not from the mind. That's what it is. It's a non-dualistic. As soon as you follow your brain, that's it. You're going into dualistic territory. You're not able to kind of unify everything and understand it properly. So there's so many things in spirituality that you just cannot bring your mind. And there's so many Sufi stories that tell you leave your mind at the door and then come in. You know, like the story of Moses and Khizr. He couldn't logically understand what Khizr was doing. He had to trust, which is part of the trusting sometimes and surrendering. You don't understand what's happening, you know? So, yeah. So I just wanted to comment on that. But go ahead, Antoine.
That was, yeah. Actually, I think I was gonna say something in relation relationship to what you're saying. There was this place in the book where he had first discovered fire, and he tried to grasp fire, and he realized, oh, it burned him. And it goes on to tell us about like either it was saying this or I projected this on it about how him trying to grasp this fire with his hand was analogous of him trying to understand the essence of that thing, or I think he called it the primordial mover, with just his intellect and mind. He had to have an epiphany or a breakthrough or some sort of experience to grasp this eternal mover or primordial mover, however they defined it, or that thing that animated his mother. And him reaching for it was something he couldn't grasp until he had this epiphany of like, oh, there is something animating us all that is separate from the thing being animated, and at the same time one and the same, giving life to it. And there was this extension of him being burned by the fire that showed he ended up receiving some knowledge and learning how to master this fire and learning to cook with it and learning how it moved up the twig instead of, all these things he learned through the experience with the fire, as opposed to allowing his curiosity to take him into hurting himself, with the ignorance of just trying to grab the fire with his, anyway.
I think that, like, what that remind me of? It just remind me of when I was a little kid, right? Like being around fire and hearing my mom, mainly my mom, like, don't play with that. It's gonna burn you. But I had to test it for myself. Like,
Yes.
I had to, like, I would see, like, I hear you, but when she's not around, I go to her lighter, and I burn myself many times. That's just to show how
Yeah,
stubborn I was.
exactly.
Um,
That's like my son right now. Okay, I realize it. I cannot reason with him when it comes to him experimenting and adventures that he goes on. I was like, okay, I gotta trust the divine, let him experience it. Then if it's a bad or good experience, he processes it, and then it really settles in, good or bad for him. But you cannot tell someone that it's not good for you, because they have to live it. You just can't.
yeah, exactly. And there's a level of, there's a different kind of level in knowing once it's actually experienced. And I guess that's the reason why, mystics go on their journey, right?
Yep.
Because, like, I hear you, I know you're telling me this, I know you're telling me that, but I gotta know. And in order for
Yeah,
me to know,
exactly.
I gotta experience. In order for me to experience, I gotta go through this quote unquote hell, or trying to touch this fire and
Yeah.
experience this burn for myself. Um, which I guess there's that. Yeah, it can sometimes be
That,
dangerous, I guess. And
yeah, that reminds me of I had a dream many years ago when I was first starting off on this mystic path or whatever you want to call it. And it was like this spiral staircase, okay? And I was going up this spiral staircase. And while I was going up, there's these rooms that I was here and there exiting while I was going through the different layers. I had to experience, say, I go in a room, I experience some scenario or something happens to me. I gain wisdom of whatever happened there, and I bring it back to the stairway, and then I'm going further. So it's just part of the experience. You have to experience something to get an inner wisdom of something. You'll see this with everyone that is very developed maturity wise. You'll see that they've experienced a lot. They've experienced a lot of pain too to be able to get to that advanced level. You can't just reach it. It's just not possible. So when you see someone going, and I see this, when I see someone going through more problems, I see them as an advanced soul more than I see them as a problem soul, because God gave them those challenges because they're strong enough to carry them. So that's why it's very tricky to kind of maneuver, because you don't know what lesson someone is gaining from an experience, and you have to let them experience it, for themselves. And everyone's experiences are so different, so unique to them and what they need, so you just got to let them. Okay, go.
uh,
It's a maze. It's a maze. It can get confusing sometimes, but then you have to maneuver it through your intuition and gaining that sort of understanding what intuition really is, and not letting that fear of the mind get in, and sort of like the challenges that always come up with the mind. But it's a tricky journey.
definitely, definitely. And that, yeah, that's that discernment. And that's why, in in prayer, I'm like, God teach me, but the easy way. like like
Yes.
I gotta go through, all the pain and stuff like that. I'm okay to be taught, gentle, easy, no problem. Um, because yeah, it can be, and sometimes in life and in reality, um, we may not have a say in the environment we are uh, brought up in, and the kind of conditioning that may be put on us from from a younger age and whatnot. And yeah, yeah, sometimes
Yeah,
we don't have control over these things.
there is an easy way, though. I do feel like there is a harder way to learn the lessons, and there is an easy way. There is a more graceful way of gaining the wisdom from a lesson and not going through the pain of it. I've noticed this with different people. If you surrender enough and you control your mind enough and you don't fear it enough and you sort of maneuver it kind of through a lot of confidence, you're able to pass the test sooner than later. You know what I mean? Otherwise, a lot of people, they go through the same lesson over and over again just because they haven't passed it, and they haven't. You have to extract the lesson that's being taught through any experience. Once you have extracted it, you'll notice that you will move on to the next level. Your karma has been cleared, as they say, and then you can move on.
Mm,
So it definitely is like that. There is an easier way to tackle it sometimes.
fact. And
Yeah.
I do feel that, and that's in an essence of real and true facing of oneself. Um, a real and honest observation of oneself, and face to face with oneself. Otherwise, um, which is in reality for for me looks like total acceptance and love of oneself in order to really gain that spark of confidence, in order to even do that leap, right? So there's this level of um, acceptance, love, and desire that kind of comes like and allows for that leap, um, to jump. There's this quote by Rumi, or a line of poetry by Rumi that says, I think I shared it with you, Antoine, that says, a lion leaps out of his cage, a man leaps out of his mind. So this imagery of leaping out of one's mind is the same as a lion leaping out of his cage. And Rumi went on to describe what bravery was. It's sweet madness, he described it as. Like this imagery of really, going for it, going to quote unquote past that level. I'm gonna pass this level with this sweet madness of bravery, of leaping out of my mind like a lion leaps out of his cage. You know. Wait, what is that? Oh, sorry, I thought somebody was talking about not talking.
Sorry, I'm in the parking lot and there's a little noise here.
Oh,
Someone just said something about madness, which is so funny. What a synchronicity.
yeah. So having that as as a quote unquote baseline, I guess, or not baseline. What is the word? As a mechanism, as a mode to operate in. There's a mode, there's some kind of operating system that we're operating in, and having this system be a leaping from the mind or out of the mind, really. Which is interestingly in the book, he starts to get there after that point of okay, we're gonna leave the reason behind, and he starts to describe the quote unquote mode of the body, the soul, kind of, and then the most transcendent. It's like, okay, I'm gonna test out the body and what it needs, and because it's closest to physicality, I'm gonna give it its minimum. I'm gonna give it what it requires, but to minimum. I'm gonna give it food, nourishment, and sex, and that was these things that the body required. The body requires. I'm gonna give it that, and then what was it for that? Do you remember that part, Angela? For the
He wanted to stop eating the animals, you're saying, or he and decided that it was okay, or was that section around there?
No, so yeah, that was all part of like the same section of like understanding or putting, I guess, some kind of limitations around his body, or what to feed the body, what not to feed, in what quantity, what to do, what does it need, right? The interesting thing is like there's this recognition that even having this experience, we are still physical. Okay, I'm gonna try not eating for as long as possible. Like, yeah, now, you know, um, or this notion like, oh, I'm a spiritual being having human experience, and just staying there, and like, it's the other is also true. Um, and then going into these other layer of kindness and virtue, and what he called as the angelic sphere, not angelic sphere, the heavenly bodies and whatnot. So he would see if an animal is hurt, he would help it, and having these qualities of kindness. I wonder that, the importance of going in that order, quote unquote, right? Like, let me focus on my body. And this is kind of in essence similar to that pyramid of needs or whatever. What is that called?
Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Yeah, it was similar to that in some kind of way. Yeah.
You had mentioned a question in there, didn't you? Or you were just expressing, bro? I thought I heard a question in there also.
Yeah. The question is like the going in, is there an importance, quote unquote, in going in that order? Is there an order, first of all, to deeper self-knowledge? Is there an order of things? Number one. And number two, if there is, and what the guy's suggesting in the book to say, okay, I'm gonna eat at a minimum, I'm not gonna overindulge in eating. I'm not gonna overindulge in my physical um, needs. I'm just gonna give it exactly what it needs. And the way that I'm gonna figure that out is by experimentation. So I'm gonna eat more, I'm gonna eat less and see where's that sweet spot is. And I know I'm not going over that threshold. Um, and same thing for the other part, which was more of like an ethical, right? Like if you're seeing animal hurt, helping. If you're seeing a plant needs water and there's a rock in the way that's blocking the flow of water, take the rock out. So there's this genuine support service um, character attribute that's being developed, right? That everything around me is alive, everything around me uh, is an extension. And by doing good, by doing beautiful, I'm also enhancing myself in that process. So yeah, so the question is there an order? Do you feel there's an order? And if so, does his order match that?
It's a great question. If I was to take a stab at it, I would think so. I think there maybe Maslow is right when he talks about you have to have food, shelter, and clothing, and then safety and intimacy, and then there's this place where you can go to figure out self-actualization, which I'm, equating with, I guess, spiritual enlightenment or this idea of mysticism or something like that. Because, even though probably most of us have had our trauma and our stresses, we're not existing in a world where we have to really go hunt for our own food or build our own houses or, we still got to figure that stuff out. But if those things weren't figured out, I don't know that I would have the time to focus on God in that kind of way, other than like, God, please help me find something to eat tonight or whatever like that. But yeah, I think those basic necessities have to be met in order for the body to get to a level of self-efficiency where it can then reason and relate to this concept of what's running this whole thing. What does anybody else or everybody else think about that?
I guess I think there's definitely many paths up the mountain, so to say. So I don't think there's like a formula, um, but certainly overindulgence in material things, I imagine, poses a hindrance because all of the spiritual traditions kind of say the same thing. In Tantra yoga, they talk about the yamas and the niyamas, and then the yamas are sort of like the brakes, the things that you're supposed to do to put the brakes on your impulses, your instincts, your desires, um, to promote things like nonviolence and kindness and moderation and things like that. So I think all of the traditions kind of, you see this universality of like, yes, moderation is important when it comes to bodily, material needs and pleasures, because a need taken too far, can become overindulgence or pleasure. And when you go that hedonistic route, I imagine it can, without awareness and consciousness and balance, it can take you off the correct path, if you will. Yeah, but I don't think there's one formula. I don't think you need to, first discipline your body and then, you know, you'll be able to access other route, maybe. I mean, maybe there's some people who really perfected it and this is the way that they've done it and this is, the capital T truth for them based on their experience, but I don't think that um, the average person, when equipped with just these fundamental principles and knowledge and like the intention, that intention, that desire to follow that thread and to, if you're fortunate, have a teacher to guide you, you know, you'll be walking up the mountain. I don't know if we all have the privilege to get to the top, but yeah, that's what I
It's
think.
me. That's really beautiful. I really agree with that. It's just kind of like you're going up the mountain, you gotta build strength to get up the mountain, right? You're gonna get too tired, you won't be able to make it. So you have to, I personally believe that there is a level of self mastery within the body that has to happen first before you can get anywhere. If you are binging on junk food, you're never going to get healthy. It's kind of like that. It's like you're spiritually never going to get healthy if you have certain blocks when it comes to your bodily sort of desires that keep coming in the way. That's why the concept of fasting comes into play in Islam. It's just you have to have a level of self-restraint to be able to see what spirituality entails. Like it does require a level of discipline, I do feel. This has been my experience. So kind of, you do have to develop certain restraints before you can get anywhere. So I don't know,
Yeah,
kind of
I
like
think
that.
that's beautiful, and thank you both for sharing that. I do believe and agree with what you said, Madeline, as far as like this multiple paths really leading to that summit. Um, and with what you were saying, Sana, as far as like the discipline and cultivating that strength, because really like, I mean, Antoine, you've done long periods of water fasting. Um, I've done the last one I've done was like 6 days of water fast. And the experience was, it was such a surreal experience because as my body was getting weaker, internally, this like spirit strength was becoming more and more heightened. Um, which is like, it's still leaving me in some kind of like, what was that? Right? So, um, maybe there's something to that, there's something to be said about that. But there's this level of discipline, right? Um, and I view that discipline, I guess, I don't even know how to put this. So there's the discipline that I view like music, okay? To be annihilated in the discipline, right? So in order for me to make a certain pattern or play a certain pattern of drum or a certain piece of violin, right? Um, I really have to I have to practice. My body, my arm, my posture, the way I'm standing has to be in complete unison in order to be able to play that particular pattern, that particular piece, that particular note, um, in the way that the note is or the piece or the pattern is imagined and is emerging. So that's how I see discipline, as the cultivation of the nervous system in order to do its proper job. And anything other than that becomes noise. Like the what's the word?
Religiosity.
Religiosity that gets to be imposed on what quote unquote discipline is, whether, uh, eating pork is good or bad, whether, I'm sleeping with a man or woman is good or bad, whether um having multiple partners is good or whatever it is, right? Whether I'm rich, filthy rich or not is good or bad. Um, those stuff become noise, and everything else beyond that, as far as the discipline, that's just for me and how I get to have some kind of reference to what discipline is. Um, I feel like for myself, for the longest time, discipline came with judgment. So judgment was the lens of discipline. There was a practice um, of in Sufism called muhasaba, or I learned it actually. The first thing I learned it from was Manly P. Hall. It's called retrospect, which got from Pythagorean sect of mystic sects and stuff like that, and Plato and all of that. And the way that they do it is before they go to sleep, they play their day in retrospection. So they go over each action that they did backwards before until going to sleep. So they go from the point of sleep, okay, I whatever, brushed my teeth, I did this, did that, did that. So they go over all actions and account for those actions. Now the challenge with that accounting is if it's done with judgment, guilt and shame are gonna come through, you know. So um, developing our discernment in, okay, was that action moving towards growth or was it contraction? Was that action loving or was it fear? Was that action this and that? And I think each one of us will have their own scale, I guess, of what that discernment is. Um, but for me, that's how discipline manifests. That's how it got to establish itself. Really, it's through music. Music has been like the greatest teacher as far as um, these concepts.
I have this quote that kind of went with what you guys were saying about religion from the book. He was saying, High's preaching to the islanders serves but to bring home to him that the experience of truth must come from within, and that though there may be a few for whom this experience is possible, for the majority of human beings, religion is a social rather than a spiritual necessity. That hit pretty hard for me. I was like, in not a bad way, but a good way, like, oh, he's saying for most beings, religion is a social rather than a spiritual necessity. It's very interesting. It gives me room to pause and really think about the place religion holds in our societies, and then the place that what we're calling spirituality holds in our lives.
Hmm. Yeah, that's
Yeah. I was just gonna say that's like I mean, that for some people, I think discipline is their religion, you know? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's all it is. They don't need to take it to any other level than that, aside
Mm-hmm.
from this is my routine, these are my rituals, this is how I'm gonna live my life, and that's it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow. Actually, that's even a perspective I hadn't thought of. what you just said, Shaw, that like I have, from just listening to you say that one point, I think I have a bias actually that all people in religion need to get to a specific point of mysticism or spirituality. I hadn't really saw that until you said what you said actually, but like I can get why. I'm sure that I've come by that bias honestly, as far as my relationship with growing up with different religions around me. But like, but that too is sort of a judgment that I'm imposing actually on anyone of any faith. Like, yeah, they're Muslim, yeah, they're Christian, yeah, they're Hindu or Buddhist, but like, have they tasted? You know what I mean? And do they need to? Like, how's that my business? Kind of thing.
Yeah,
You
no,
know?
you're not alone with that bias. I mean, I hold the same. I've had that same thought of like, what's the point then? You know, you're not gonna go deeper. You're not gonna go deeper into your heart and
Right.
understand that you're one with everything then. But, you know, I guess this is that point that I think the prophet makes, peace be upon him, of like you meet people where they're at. You gotta
Right.
talk to people where they're at. So,
Facts.
Yeah, yeah, that is a beautiful point because like you, Antoine, I haven't like before what you just said, like shared that perspective. Really, I haven't. I was like, wait a second. Yeah, yeah, you're right. Absolutely. And being able to recognize that bias again. Yeah, man, that's crazy. Like judgment really can start to take different forms and different forms in reassurance, so having mirrors, you know, to reflect all of that and being able to catch these judgments that, seep through the cracks. Um, that is a blessing. That's definitely a blessing to say, okay, wow, I caught that for not even I caught that was caught for me because it was reflected and it was said in such a way.
Yeah,
yeah,
there.
I totally.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that it reminds me of a Sufi thing that my guide here says a lot, and he says that you know how we do the prayer beads and we say Allah Allah on them. So he said that Sheikh Nazim used to say, who's the name of my guide, used to say it's not important to say Allah Allah, it's important to be with Allah. So whatever that means, right? And we can get caught up in the rituals of things and not get to the essence of it all our lives. And he used to also mention, don't pray like a chicken, like you're plucking the floor and eating the corn. You gotta actually pray. Like, what does it entail, right? But I do see a lot of us follow these rituals really with just out of habit. It's just something we're comfortable with. And I had a conversation with my friend Alicia about this too. Like a lot of people, Muslims, are very comfortable with just doing it, and they don't get past that. Like it acts as a block in many ways. Their prayer will act like a block because they think that that's it. That's all there is to spirituality. So many Muslims get caught up in just praying. Okay, I pray 5 times a day. There's nothing else to do. I'm meeting my obligations. No, there's a whole freaking other journey you gotta go. It's not just about that. So yeah, I just thought I'd share that. Go ahead, Shah. Sorry.
No, that's actually, I mean, that lines up to what I was gonna say to earlier, Osama, you were talking about um, discipline and the role that it plays. And I think it's so much about intentionality and having that foundation. So when you have people who maybe are just doing the daily prayers and are finding contentment or enough of a relationship with the divine through that, through that intention and just that simple act of discipline, then,
Yeah.
I mean, inshallah, it leads to, more longing and more wondering, but in a way, it's something to be, envious of that.
Yeah.
They found that unity just through the discipline, you know.
Mhm.
So I find myself in pain a lot of the time with my mind and my heart battling and wanting to know more and having to surrender to the fact that I may never truly know
Mm.
what any of this is. So yeah, alhamdulillah for it all.
Mm. Thank God. Wow, that's so beautiful. And that's an amazing reminder about intentionality, um, and intention. I was talking, I know we just have like 3 minutes left, but I think this is a great place to end this. Um, I was talking to a teacher, somebody's kind of, actually it's a group, another kind of like group gathering, and talking about this saying in the tradition that says, in Arabic it says, إنما الأعمال بالنيات ولكل امرئ ما نوى, which means works are by their intentions, and to each individual, and for each individual is their intention. And the way uh, that quote, whatever you want to call it, resonates with me is that intentions are the true essence and the true character of the action. So if I am, and this I'm going back to music here, if I am becoming more quote unquote disciplined, or disciplining my posture in learning a particular pattern with an intention to deepen my relationship with myself and ultimately the source of who I am and reaching that essence, then even the same action of hitting the drum, with each hit, I'm becoming more and more in tune into myself. And just by shifting that intention, right? And I think that's what, Shah, you were pointing at, is that just by the action on the outside and the discipline on the outside and everything on the outside can be the same. And then doing this to the intention, changing the spark, the fire that fuels the action outside, can make the whole difference. The whole difference. So, God willing, we can walk in our lives with intention, speak our truth with intention, do all of the actions that we're doing in intention, and build our relationships and love on each other and be loved on, and do all of these acts of service to ourselves and others, and work out and do all of those things with intention. Like, yeah, inshallah, God willing, man. I know it's time, but I feel like we can spend even another um, hour and a half with this amazing company. Thank you guys so much for showing up, not just in presence, but actually showing up really in who you are and sharing with us yourselves and your journey and who you are, and getting us um, a taste, and acting as mirrors for us and teachers. So thank you guys so much. We truly, truly appreciate you and for being here. We have our next meeting June 20. 4th, I think, or something like that. And I will send the emails for that. So if you're up for it and if you're around, please join us. It will be another call, kind of similar to this, and we'll dive in and get to know each other more and more. And yeah,